Welcome to Woman's Secret Signals, where nothing is ever just a coincidence in love, and every silence, glance, and change in behavior is telling you something you've been missing. If you've ever felt confused about what she really means, if you've ever overthought her words, her distance, or her sudden change in energy, then stop right here, because what you're about to learn will change the way you see relationships forever. Because here's the truth most men never understand. Women don't always say what they feel, but they always show it. And once you know how to read those hidden signals, you'll never feel lost in love again. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might finally give you the clarity you've been searching for. There are moments in life when everything feels silent, but your mind is loud. You may be sitting alone right now, scrolling without even knowing what you're looking for. Maybe you're thinking about someone who left. Maybe you're confused about a relationship that used to feel safe, but now feels uncertain. Or maybe you're just tired, emotionally drained from giving too much and getting too little in return. And here's something you don't hear often enough. Not everything that breaks you is meant to destroy you. Some things break you open so you can finally see clearly. This message is not random. It's not just another video in your feed. And if you're still watching right now, it's because something inside you needed to hear this more than you realize. Because when your heart is overwhelmed, your mind starts creating stories. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe I lost the right person. But the truth is often much simpler and much harder to accept. People don't leave because you are not enough. They leave because they are not aligned with who you are becoming. And that difference changes everything. You see, emotional pain has a way of making you question your value. It makes you replay conversations, analyze messages, and search for hidden meanings in things that were already clear. But clarity doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly. Like this moment right now, this message is here to slow you down long enough to realize something important. You are not falling behind in love. You are being redirected. And I know that's not easy to accept, especially when your emotions are still attached to someone who is already halfway gone. But stay with this for a moment. Because what if the loss you're feeling is not a punishment, but protection? What if life is not taking someone away from you, but saving you from something that would have hurt even more later? This is where your story begins to shift. Not when they come back, not when they apologize, but when you finally stop abandoning yourself just to hold on to someone else. Let's be honest, letting go is never just about a person. It's about the memories you built with them, the future you imagined, the version of yourself that only existed when you were with them. That's why even when something is clearly hurting you, your heart still tries to hold on. Because attachment doesn't care about logic, it cares about emotional history, and this is where most people get stuck. They confuse attachment with love, but they are not the same thing. Love feels peaceful, even when it's intense. Attachment feels anxious, even when it's familiar. If you find yourself constantly overthinking, waiting for replies, checking your phone, or replaying old conversations, that's not love controlling you. That's emotional dependency, building quietly in the background. And the painful truth is this: you don't miss the person as much as you miss how they made you feel at your best moments. That feeling becomes addictive. The attention, the validation, the sense of being chosen. And when it disappears, your mind starts chasing it like it's something you need to survive. But here's what you must understand: not every connection is meant to stay. Some are meant to teach you where you lose yourself. And you lose yourself in small ways first. You start ignoring red flags because of potential. You start accepting less because you remember the good days. You start adjusting your personality just to avoid losing them. Slowly, without noticing, you begin shrinking yourself just to fit into a space that was never stable to begin with. And still, you call it love. But real love doesn't require you to constantly question your worth. So ask yourself honestly, are you in love? Or are you just afraid of starting over? Because fear is powerful. It can keep you attached to people who are already emotionally gone. But the moment you start seeing the attachment for what it is, not love but habit, you begin to take your power back. At some point in your story, the truth was already there, not hidden, not confusing, not complicated. You just weren't ready to accept it. Because when your heart is invested, your mind becomes selective. It only focuses on what it wants to believe, not what is actually happening. And that's why you missed the signs. You called it busy when they stopped making time for you. You called it stress when their efforts started disappearing. You called it just a phase when their interest slowly faded. But deep down, you felt it, the shift, that emotional distance that doesn't need words to be noticed. They didn't leave all at once. Most people don't. They leave in stages. First, the excitement fades. Then, the communication becomes inconsistent. Then, the effort drops. And finally, you start doing all the emotional work alone, trying to keep something alive that the other person has already stopped nurturing. But here's the hardest part: you didn't leave either. You stayed longer than you should have, hoping things would return to how they used to be. And that hope is what keeps people stuck the longest, because hope makes you ignore reality. You start analyzing every small moment. When they smiled at me, maybe things are still okay. When they replied late, maybe they were just tired. When they acted different, maybe I overthink too much. But deep down, your intuition already knew. And your intuition is rarely wrong. It's just often ignored. The truth is, when someone values you, you don't have to decode their behavior. You don't have to guess where you stand. You feel it clearly through consistency. So if you constantly feel confused in a relationship, that confusion is already an answer. Not every connection is meant to be fixed. Some are meant to be recognized and released. There is a moment in every painful attachment where things stop being about love and start becoming about survival. You don't realize it at first. It begins quietly. You start changing your behavior just to avoid conflict. You start choosing your words more carefully so you don't push them away. You start waiting longer to text first, not because you don't care, but because you're afraid of looking needy. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to lose your natural self. That confident version of you, the one who laughed easily, spoke freely, and didn't question every interaction, it starts fading. In its place comes anxiety. You begin overthinking everything. Did I say too much? Should I have stayed quiet? Why did they reply like that? But here's the truth most people don't want to face. If a connection requires you to shrink yourself to maintain it, it is already costing you your emotional peace. And emotional peace is something you never truly notice until you lose it. You start building your entire mood around one person's attention. When they are present, you feel okay. When they are distant, your whole world feels unstable. That is not love anymore. That is emotional dependence slowly taking control. And the most dangerous part is this: you start believing that if you try harder, things will go back to how they were in the beginning. But what you're chasing is not real anymore. You are chasing a version of them that only existed at the start, the version that required no effort to maintain because everything was new, exciting, and temporary. Now you are trying to force consistency out of inconsistency, and that never works. This is the turning point most people miss. The moment where you realize you are not losing them. You are losing yourself while trying to keep them. And once you see that clearly, something inside you begins to shift. Not because the pain disappears, but because you finally understand the cost of staying. There comes a quiet moment, almost unnoticeable at first, when something inside you stops chasing. You still care, but not the same way. You still remember, but it doesn't pull you apart anymore. You still feel the past, but it no longer controls your present. That is the beginning of your return to yourself. And it doesn't happen because the other person changed. It happens because you did. You start to see things differently. The late replies that once hurt don't feel like rejection anymore. They feel like clarity. The mixed signals that once confused you don't feel like mystery anymore. They feel like distance. And distance, when you are honest with yourself, is also an answer. You begin to understand something powerful. If someone wanted to stay, you wouldn't have to question it so often. And this realization doesn't come with anger, it comes with peace. a strange, uncomfortable peace at first, because your mind is so used to chaos that calm feels unfamiliar. But slowly, you stop checking your phone as much. You stop rereading old messages. You stop rebuilding conversations in your head that never went anywhere in reality. And in that space, something important returns. You, the version of you that didn't overthink every interaction, the version that didn't measure their worth through someone else's attention, the version that was whole before they arrived and can be whole again after they leave. This is what choosing yourself actually looks like. Not a dramatic moment, not revenge, not proving anything, just quiet detachment from what was already leaving you emotionally empty. And here's the truth that changes everything. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving someone. It means you stop abandoning yourself for someone who is not choosing you back. And when you reach this point, something unexpected happens. You stop begging for closure because you realize clarity was always there. You stop hoping for their return because you finally understand what it cost you to wait. You stop questioning your worth because you see that your value was never dependent on their attention. And that's when life begins to shift again. Not because someone comes back, but because you finally do.